We're very lucky today to have a broad selection of very experienced people in the AgTech arena. I'm going to let them give a sentence of introduction themselves before we kick off with a few questions from me and hopefully, as the crowd comes back in, a few from the audience. Please, Stefan.
Yeah, good morning. Stefan Fürnsinn, leading digital farming in Yara. We're the global market leader in crop nutrition and using technology starting from crop nutrition to make a difference in responsibly feeding the world and protecting the planet. Super exciting to be here in Asia.
Hi, Amol Deshpande, CEO, co-founder of Farmers Business Network. FBN is a network of farmers and their information. We use technology, machine learning, data science to empower farmers, ultimately with information, but then also help them reduce their costs on inputs, market their crops better, effectively make farmers more profitable. And our mission is completely centered around helping family farmers and smallholder farmers all over the world.
Thanks, Amol. Justin.
Hi, my name is Justin Gong. I'm co-founder at XAG. We are one of the biggest drone and robotic company in agriculture. Basically, we do four things. One is lay the foundation for digital farming, like high-definition map using drones and navigation network. The second is we provide drones and robots for precision farming, can apply chemicals more efficiently. And third one is we provide IoT solutions to farmers so they can connect with consumers in the future. And also we're feeding those data to our AI and building AI to make smarter decisions for farmers.
And just for the audience, Justin, which geographies are you primarily operating in?
We mainly in China, but we are now operating in 38 countries. So Latin America, Australia, Southeast Asia, and Africa.
Thank you. Rupesh.
Thanks, Adam. I'm Rupesh Goel. I head products. I'm Chief Product Officer at CropIn Technologies, based out of Bangalore, India. We are a full-stack SaaS company. In that terminology, we provide farm digitization solutions to both farmer and companies wanting to digitize their farm processes. And we couple that with the AI layer to manage risk for smallholder farmers as well.
Thank you. And finally, Stephen.
Stephen Tompkins from Inmarsat. We're the global market leader in satellite communications. So we provide satellite-enabled internet across the globe. So if you're a grower and you're in an area of low connectivity, no 4G, Wi-Fi, we're connecting all the ground-based sensors, vehicles to flow over our network into the platforms of your choice.
Very good. So we've been asked to discuss the latest innovations in remote sensing, IoT and AI. I think we have the right panel for that. I'd like to draw on the difference of experiences of this panel and just to highlight some of that for the audience. We have corporate services to ag, we have startup in India, we have more established later stage startup in China, we have one of the more established ag tech companies in the US here, but not yet operating in Asia. Is that correct, Amol?
Soon, not yet.
Soon, but not yet. Okay, kind of the same thing. But we have Stefan, who's representing Yara, but also is representing large corporate ag for our panel. With that variety of perspectives, we're going to kick off with an open question. We're going to get more detail quickly, I hope. But the opening question that Jenny and Rethink gave us was, how can the latest innovation in remote sensing, IoT and AI be utilized for a more predictive, precise and connected approach to Asian agriculture? That's a hell of a question. I think considering, Justin, that sounded like the description of your company and not far off yours, Rupesh. Let's kick off with the two of you, but just Justin. In a nutshell, how is AI making a difference for the Asian farmer, in your opinion?
I think it's because AI is empowering the smallholders. Because we are now using AI to control the drones and the robots instead of manual control. So it can provide more safe and accurate spray to the crops. And this is saving a lot of labor and also making the cost of plant protection much, much cheaper. So the smallholders now can compare with the large farms in the US.
And yes, you're talking about smallholder farmers. There's not the same number of those in, say, the US, but why else is this different in Asia as opposed to the experience that we're seeing in the US?
because of the nature of land distribution. I think it's because the fields are more segmented and the food are more diversified, not monoculture. So that's why to provide a flexible, small and smart device is much more important here.
Okay, and we'll come back to what your algorithm is actually delivering and whether the difference it's making in a moment. If we jump to Amol, your US experience, first of all, is there a role for AI at the moment in FBN? If so, what is it delivering for your customers?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're a machine learning and AI company. The role is using information to help the farmer make those key decisions that are very, very important to their P&L. So an example is, what seed should I plant? But that's a very simplistic thing. What AI can help with is tell you, are there other varieties that'll work better for the seed or soil you have? What is the planting rate that I should establish? How is this going to perform depending on the other agronomic practices that we use? The other place that I think AI could be very helpful, interestingly, is in marketing of crops. And especially when you're using or subject to something like a futures market in commodity crops, you can use those types of technologies to take the emotion out of marketing crops, and that's been another very successful platform for us.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that? If I'm a farmer, how is AI helping me market my crop?
Well, for example, it's a lot like an index fund in a way, where, and it's not as simplistic, because what you have to do is incorporate far more data points than an index does. But there's things in commodity crop marketing like the carry trade that are very obvious, where if you actually hold your crop for a certain period of time, you're going to make 30 or 40 cents more a bushel, for example, if you have corn. But what's less clear is, depending on the data that's coming in, depending on what's happening with planting, with harvest, how you should adjust those decisions in any given year. And that's where AI comes in, because you can take massive amounts of real-world information and then risk adjust those decisions for a farmer, while also giving them sort of established practices that will result in better net return.
So ultimately, from a farmer's perspective, this is a piece of advice. It's a black box, but you just think your black box is going to be better for the farmer. Is that right?
Well, I think the black box is better than human emotion. I think that's been proven true even in the securities industry. It's why if you have a father like mine was, they'll tell you from the age of 11, you should just put your money in an index fund, pay low fees, because you're going to beat the market 80% of the time. And I think that is exactly what we are trying to help a farmer do. We're not trying to tell them that we know so much more than everybody else. We're trying to say, take the emotion out of what you're doing, rely on the data, and that's going to be a better net result for you.
Okay, and we didn't get to what's happening in Asia, but let's jump to India. First of all, please give us a context of, do you think the experience in India is going to be different from what Justin's been doing in China? Or can we just talk at the smallholder farmer Asian level with our AI question for CropIn?
So Adam, there is, as Justin said, there is the landholding pattern in India, which is a very unique characteristic. Most of the farmers are less than 1.1 hectares and below. So, as Amol said, there is a scale issue in how do you scale technology in India. But like you were asking, for us, one of the things we took is how do we arrange financing and insurance support to farmers. So we are using AI to actually give some sort of a farmer score when the satellite passes over somebody's land every 5 days, like the Sentinel-2 and the Sentinel-1. We sort of capture what they've been growing, what they've committed to the bank. Have they lied on their forms, if at all? Do they need more money because they've grown a crop which is not growing as well? So those are it's more of an approach where you use AI to actually monitor crop growing in various stages, and then tell them the score is dropping, the yields are not as good as they should be, there is some pest, and use that real time to allow the banks and insurance companies to actually look at it.
And is that solution going to work just as well in China as it does in India for CropIn at the moment?
Well, China is a little bit different because some of the GIS stuff wouldn't work in China. For something like Google Maps wouldn't work the way we have sort of.
Okay, that's a good, obvious, nuanced answer that wasn't at the top of my list. Thank you. Yeah.
Correct. So there are some tech issues to get into China.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, but platform-wise, it would work. It's just that we have to get some of the basic things out of the way. So.
And then if you do fly across the pond and try to do this in the US, where I understand CropIn has some business in the US, a little bit more, I think, in Central America.
Correct. The boundaries, if you see the land boundaries in the US and LATAM, actually are very well defined. So the algorithms, if it works in India, they would definitely work in US and Latin.
If it works in
The
India,
lines
it will
are much-
definitely work in the US.
The lines are much straighter there than they are, and we don't have,
Okay.
you know.
I'm going to check in a minute, Amol, whether that applies the opposite way. Stephen, you're not writing AI algorithms for farmers, I understand. You're providing a service to the people that are. How is it different when you're working with somebody who's servicing an Asian farmer or a smallholder farmer, or just generally an Asian client versus North America, Western Europe?
So I think the way I would come at it is that everything we do is flow data into platforms to power the AI, the machine learning, that kind of stuff. And whilst there are different contexts in different geographies, I think there are some basic ingredients, as in basic monitoring data that can be useful to those systems. So things like water level monitoring, soil moisture monitoring, storage monitoring, and we're finding broad applicability of that across different geographies.
Okay. Stefan, quiet so far, representing corporate interests in AgTech here, perhaps globally, but we're going to go into Asia. Artificial intelligence, Yara. How's it making a difference for Yara? How's it making a difference for Yara's clients?
So I actually want to start with
answering your own question?
No. We are where we are as an industry, with AI. Because if you compare a little bit with other industries, we are in the super early phases. So that means we need to build a market. We need to build a capability in farmers, in the whole ecosystem, and we need to do that sort of while we actually exploring the technology. So if you say how, that was your initial question, how will this happen? I would have said, and how will it happen in smallholder markets? I would have said, first of all, step by step. And the second of all, with a lot of dedication. So what I think will not work is to take something that works in the US and say, now let's apply it in India, or let's apply it in Thailand, or let's bring it to Bangladesh and sort of Africa. This is very different. So the first thing is, I think it needs real effort. Because we have a different user group, the land patterns are different, the crops are different, the ecosystem is different, the user capability is different, the value chain is different, so everything is different. So it's very important to have dedication. And if I take the Yara example, we put a lot of effort actually in a dedicated smallholder organization in digital farming that runs actually with obviously synergies, but with a different strategy and approach than the professional markets. And that is based out of Singapore here, and that operates in Asia and Africa as a focus. And I think that is very important. A second thought that I have is step by step. So it's very difficult to take farmers that have been traditionally applying the moon phases or other things for doing some of the agricultural practice, and then you say, okay, now you get this super sophisticated tool, and so from tomorrow on, you're going to bet. Let's not forget, they bet their life, their income, the children go to school or not, on what they actually harvest. And then you say, okay, I have this fancy thing, just apply it tomorrow, and life will be good. So I think it's very important to look at how do you actually do that step by step. And the third thing is, how do we balance, and that's one of the big themes that I see, the need for extreme localization. If we look at India, I mean, we are working in India. Punjab is very different from Maharashtra and other areas in terms of crops, in terms of languages, farming practices, all these things. It's very different from Kenya. But how can we bring a platform logic into it from China, as we discussed? How do we get a platform logic? Because we cannot innovate, we cannot put 10 million into every crop and every state.
And
Yet
can
it
a
needs to be super specific.
Can a startup do that, or do they need Yara? Do they need corporate ag?
I think we should more think about how can we each find the role to play. It would be wrong for corporates to think that we can innovate everything. In the past, you would have said, okay, we innovate all our product portfolios, our R&D, we do it, we bring it to market. I think we see a situation where each need to find their spot, and I think a startup will have an amazing role in sort of developing technology, advancing the thinking, bringing new business model. But agriculture is not Uber.
Yeah, but they could also have a
how do
role
you
of
scale,
totally
right?
disrupting you as well, right?
Yeah, we hope.
Which I'm pretty sure at least 2 of our 3 startup panelists, if not all of them, would be just as happy to disrupt you as to work with you. So let's try to find the points of differences and where this edges. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm going to move to some high-level questions. I think our panel's settled in. Let's see if we can find a point of difference. I've got a yes-no question for you. Here we go. The first AgTech unicorn exit, as in IPO or cash now, not just valuation. It will be an Asian AgTech startup. I'm going to make this easy in the beginning. I'm going to ask Justin first.
Yes.
Okay, I like the sound of this. I'm going to finish with you, Amol. Rupesh, what do you think?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good.
I'm going to say no.
I like it. Steve, where are you sitting, Stefan?
I'm sitting next to 2 people that probably have a different opinion. I would say yes.
Interesting. Amol, where are you at on this?
No chance.
No chance. Is that because you actually hope your company is going to be the one, or you think there's a long list of companies in the US that are going to beat Asia to that title?
I think it has a lot to do with the market size, growth of the financial metrics of a business to achieve that kind of valuation. The US, Canada, these markets are just bigger in many cases, so they're going to achieve financial maturity sooner. It's a math game more than it is a market game.
Boy, is that really true? Are they really bigger? I mean, and also if we look at the revenue traction that, say, XAG's got, I mean, that's pretty impressive. In precision ag, I'm not sure if you do disclose high level what your revenue number is, but there's not many companies in precision ag that have breached 50 million revenue full stop, and both of you are sitting in that field, right? Okay, size of market is your reason. I also think you could add, in the past, you could have added depth of funding in the VC market. Asia's catching up pretty quickly there. Justin, what's your response? Why is it going to be Asia? Defend your turf, and in particular your company.
I think it's because of the population of farmer, the diversification of food production, and the size of the farms, but also the numbers of farms. We have only 42,000 drones running every day, but it produces about 200 terabytes of data to feed our AI every day. And we've developing a lot of AI products based on those data. So I think hardware, amount of hardware, the amount of farms we are servicing can really accelerate the training of AI and also the connectivity of the cloud computing and the IoT and the blockchain technology.
Rupesh, without repeating anything we've already heard, is there any other factor here that's going to make Asia the winner, in your opinion?
I would say we should take into account the government, if at all. Once they get serious on what they have to do politically for the farmers,
We've seen that in other sectors, right?
this can get really big really fast in Asia if the political setup is, on the right. I mean, he's right, there are more farmers, they're struggling, a lot of issues, but the data quality and the data quantity is much, much bigger. So there are some definite pluses there.
Okay, we're going to have to change topics. We can't do every topic with every person. But another yes-no question. Asian farmers will step change past their contemporaries in Western Europe and North America in a similar manner to how the landline infrastructure step was skipped in the evolution of Asian telecoms. As in, what I'm saying is that we're going to see Asian farmers not follow the development path that we've seen, but just a total step change. Maybe this is too much of a gimme. Stephen, yes or no?
Yes, I would say.
Stefan?
No?
Oh, good.
No.
Okay, I was expecting all yeses. It's already more interesting than I thought. Justin?
I'll say yes.
I would say yes too.
Okay. It was, for me, it was an obvious yes. So hit me, Stefan. Why no? Why do we have to go through the old school way? Why are smallholder farmers going to have to go through all the agony that we went through in Europe and North America?
That's not what I would say, but
That's what I
you
heard.
also left out the time horizon.
Okay, my next yes and no question talks about time horizons, but come on.
So I think the point is leapfrogging for me, and that's why I answered no, would be today you're a smallholder farmer with 1 hectare, sort of low mechanization or medium mechanization, medium if not poor farming practices, and then we say in 1 or 2 seasons that becomes consolidated, large-scale operation, precision equipment, I don't think that's a 1 or 2 year journey. So I think what I think is going to happen is a super fast evolution that will skip. So we're not going to go through the last 200 years of agricultural evolution that we have seen, for example, in Europe. But I also don't see a 1 or 2 year leapfrogging like we have seen, for example, in cell phone technology, because I think the ecosystem needs to adjust. We're talking a lot of employment, we're talking a lot of factors. So I would have said if it is on a 10-year horizon, we can see a lot of change. But if we look at 2 to 3 years, I think it takes a bit of time.
Okay, so I'll add a time dimension before I continue on this topic. But so if I hear you correctly, you're okay with the fact there'll be a step change. You don't need to follow the same pathway. You just don't think it's going to be that fast.
Yes.
So let's add the time dimension and see where everyone else sits. Within 3 years, the majority of Asian farmers won't step foot into their fields without having checked their smartphone or similar device for their latest crop insights, recommendations, and actions for the day. This is 3 years. Quick around the group. Rupesh, please. Yes, no?
I would say no for the 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, not in that time scale.
Okay, I've cut this too fine, I think. Stefan?
No, but not far off.
No.
God damn it.
Yes, only in China.
Okay, fair enough. Because Asia's different. Okay, if I make it 5 years, who would, just a quick raise of hands, who would say yes if I make it 5 years? Anyone want to change their vote?
Yes.
Okay, so the majority of people think that step change is occurring. So, Amol, I want to zone in now on FBN and your rollout in Asia. We've heard that it's a large market, high growth. You've chosen US and you're only starting here now. Why now?
Well, I mean, having had a lot of history as both an investor and an entrepreneur running companies, it's infinitely more complicated to go to a new market where someone doesn't speak English or the same language that you speak than it is adding product lines. So we've become the leading platform in the US and Canada. We're growing at a very rapid pace, probably the fastest growing in the entire market. But I haven't wanted to complicate our business or our pursuits by going to a market which we don't know very well. We're 500 employees now. We'll soon be even larger than that, within a year's time, significantly larger, and we have the resources now to do it. So in terms of why now, it's because the company is ready now.
Yeah.
And in the last 3 or 4 years, we wouldn't have been ready. And
so this is not opportunity led. This is operational necessity, as in get it right where you can first.
Yeah,
okay?
and
fair
a lot
enough.
a lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake, I think, of getting impatient with these things because they think someone else is dominating the market. And I feel when we enter, we'll have plenty of opportunity, whether we do it this year, next year, or 3 years from now.
How different is your product going to be when you come to Asia? When you think about adapting it for the smallholder farmers, what are the problem areas that you've encountered already?
It's going to be very different. So, but I actually think in a way it's a lot easier. If you look at the amount of technology that we have to deploy to reach a bar for a US or Canadian farmer to give them the incremental $60, $70 an acre of profit that we try to give them, it is a lot of investment, a lot of technology. If you look at the bar to help a smallholder farmer in a place like India or elsewhere, we've been doing a ton of research, and we think that actually can happen with a lot less just pure technology. We don't need any breakthroughs. We need design changes, we need network-based solutions, and we need transparent information. But there's certain very simple things you can do that will get farmers much further in those markets much quicker. So we actually think it'll be easier, but it's going to be very different.
Okay. And if we move this and look at it the opposite way, Rupesh, I've already heard you believe that it's going to work in any market if it works in India. Justin, as you've headed the opposite direction, I think there are two things that I've highlighted that are different from what Amol's describing. First of all, he's redoing his product for Asia, if I understood him correctly, or at least substantially changing it. And second of all, he's only staggering his rollout. You're operating in 38 countries with most of your revenue in China, so you've gone broad. And I want to hear now about how much you had to change your product for these separate countries.
Okay. About 5% of the modules has to change for adapting the radio regulations, aviation regulations, and also chemical EPA, so environmental protection regulations, but not much. Once we change, we actually change the whole system, and then China is also using the same system now. So we don't need to, it's more like to upgrade, not to change, modify.
Yeah. But what about the value proposition? Can you roll out
Value-
the same service when you go to North America as you've been
It's very different.
leading the market
It's
in
very
China?
different. So 3 years ago, that's the reason why I believe 3 years is enough time, is 3 years ago, only 0.01% of Chinese farmers were using our drone. Now 5%. And it's reaching 6.7 million farmers using the drone service in China. The business model is very simple. We work with the local chemical dealers. Their role of business is selling chemicals before. It's not sustainable. But now they are providing drone spray service, precision service, which is against their old business, which is selling less chemical. But when we move abroad, for example, we are working with Landmark in Australia. They are a traditional machinery dealer. What they do is just sell the drones to the big farms. And the farmer find out, I have my drone here, and most of the time it's idle. So I start servicing the surrounding farmers. They become service providers. So I think the business model and the value proposition will evolve in the society, in different society, but the product itself doesn't change.
And if a mole's saying, don't go to a new country until you've bedded down the first one and then you've gone to 38, what's your answer to that? How come you can go 38 countries so broadly? What's the reason that this is the better strategy than the one that Amol just described?
This is a blind strategy because we didn't go to 38 countries. 38 countries come to us. We put a video on the YouTube. They come to say, Justin, can you offer me a drone? Because I think I can use the drone in my country better than in China. And I have to say yes, because otherwise competitor will get on board, right? So this is our strategy. But now we are refining those 38 countries to come down to 9 countries. We will focus on the next step, which are very similar structure and economy in China and India. So I think it will have better impact and a much faster developing in the next year.
Okay, I like it. So we've now not given our corporates on the end that are surrounding our startups, which I think is quite appropriate, much attention or enough attention. So let's focus in. Let's start with a yes/no question on the role of corporates. Working with ag and food corporates is critical to the success for an AgTech startup in Asia. Amol, the famous collaborator with large corporate ag.
No.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that you wouldn't agree with that? Justin, I don't know what XAG's policy is on working with or disrupting big ag. Are you a yes or no on that?
I'll say no, but we learn
No, it's yes or no. Okay, it's bad luck to all those corporates that were planning on partnering with, you knew you weren't partnering that much with Amol, but Justin's also off the list. Rupesh?
I would say a yes, and I'll explain it to you.
Okay, you get to explain on this. Stephen?
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, I think you're in the yes camp. Stefan, should I ask?
I'll say no. They don't have to.
Oh, I like it. Okay, so this is a rich question, and we're going to have to go quickly to get to the key points. Rupesh, hit me. Why yes? Why are you disagreeing with? What is the corporate necessity in CropIn's business model, and why would it fail if you didn't have those relationships?
So I'll give 2 reasons. One is that specifically in Asia, because of the land-holding pattern and the digital savviness, if you might add, of the farmer itself, you need an agent layer between what is coming as inputs or is going out as data. You just cannot let the farmer use all your solutions directly.
Yep.
And the kind of capital required to make that middle layer happen cannot happen just by a startup. So you need to have, we're working with some of the large companies globally, and they want global solutions, but it's always a sub-country, sub-area hyper-configurability that you need. So to do that kind of standardization, you need large corporates to put in and say, we need a global interface with some standardization.
Okay.
But we need a layer to be able to enable that on the ground, which will not work otherwise.
Justin, you wanted to say more about your answer. Hit me.
Yeah, so at the beginning, I don't think we need the big corporation because the priority is to automate those operations to reduce chemical use. So of course they will refuse us of anything, right?
But later on, lost revenue there for sure.
Yeah, but later on when you want to move to the service part to grow more with less, we need the agronomy knowledge, and we don't have it. So we have to work with big corps.
Okay. You surprised me by saying not necessarily. Is there anything you would add or disagree with what we've already heard from Justin and Rupesh?
Two thoughts. I think it depends a lot on the startup. So not every startup, you asked a very general question, not every startup needs to work with majors. And I think the other one is, I think there is a value proposition, which I think can be around scaling and which can be around globalization, which is an option. And I think startups will benefit from doing it, but it's not a necessity. And it will not fit every case.
And Amol, look, I put you square in a corner there. I think you deserve to actually now talk about FBN's view to working with large corporate ag, and then also whether that's going to be any different in Asia, because I've well and truly pushed you into one. Let's see if you want to cement that position or come out of it.
I'll cement the position.
I like that. Go for it, please.
It depends on what your mission and your core principles are. The core principle of our business was to serve farmers. And so from my standpoint, if, for example, FBN, if we were to go and take an investment from a large corporate or announce some very strategic partnership, it would ruin our brand. Our entire mission, the employees who join our company, the investors who invest in our company, they invest in us because we're trying to make farmers more profitable. And our thesis is that farmers are being squeezed, which I haven't heard anyone that I go to many events and other things have disagreed with that point. So, if there was a way to collaborate with strategic players and keep the mission of the business pure, then of course we'd be rational about it. But in my view, that's been hard to do. Yeah. And from my standpoint, in terms of growing our business, the way we've decided to do it is to say, we're going long term. We have a vision in mind, and we're going to get the best and absolute white shoe investors in the world, like Temasek, like Google, like others who've invested in FBN, and keep the mission of the business very pure. So I don't think it has as much to do with necessity as it has to do with what is it that you're trying to build, and are you sticking to your core principles or not? And for me, it's very important, having started the business and my history in this sector, that I do what I said I'm going to do, both for our customers and the investors who come on board.
But then when you come to Asia and you're trying to get to smallholder farmers, and Rupesh, perhaps it's not exactly what you said, but what I feel is that CropIn and others are partnering down the value chain to also help fund the service and help build a larger platform. And Amol, accessing smallholder farmers, particularly as a foreign company, is not that easy. So there's a reason why some of its supply chain pooled in Asia.
I don't think it's easy. That's why we've had to raise $320 million in 5 years since we've founded, and why it's taken as long as it has 5 years to get to the point that we're at, which is a point that I'm proud of, but it's going to take even more to get where we want to go. So it's not that it's easy, it's just the way it has to be in terms of building the company that you want to build. So I don't doubt that there's probably paths of lower resistance if you were to partner or take other approaches, and I don't doubt that other startups, that's a good idea for them. But for us, that's the decision we've made. That's kind of the approach we've taken.
Okay, so I've got a lot more questions, but I'm a little bit off on my timing, but I think we have, well, I'm not 100% sure of my timing, but I want to give the audience a chance. Otherwise, I have a long list of things left that I wanted to cover. We're not going to get time for everything, but if someone would like to raise their hand and ask this panel a question, now is your first and last opportunity. Otherwise, I will keep the microphone. Anyone raising their hand? Wow, okay. Oh, yes, we do. Please go ahead. Oh, I'm not sure if they were expecting me to ask the audience questions. I apologise.
Adam Lyle, Padang. A question about to you, Amol. The whole onboarding issue of smallholder farmers, the 100 millions across ASEAN. You said, well, you think it might be easier because it's not all about technology, it's about design changes, networking. I was just wondering if you could go into that a little bit more.
Well, it's not that it's not, again, I want to be clear, it's not that it's not hard. What I think what you don't necessarily need is a fundamental technology breakthrough. You do need to understand the consumer, however. And I'll admit to you that FBN, obviously, we're not the experts in understanding smallholder farmers today. We're investing in becoming more expert at it, or we're going to find people to help us with that. But the fact is, you have to understand your client if you're going to reach them and create a frictionless onboarding or whatever the case is. I think the point I was making was that I don't think you need the deep technology you need in the US to make as big of an impact in those markets. In some cases, farmers are using open pollinated seed today. I mean, there are simple changes that will result in a lot more income for farmers, and that's the point. But I think on the design and that side of it, that is going to be hard. And that is something we're going to have local expertise for.
Good. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. So we haven't talked about the impact side. And interestingly, this time, no one in the panel actually emphasised whether impact is a fundamental part of their value proposition. And to what extent, for example, when you look forward in your strategy, let's go to CropIn, impact financing, sustainability, how is that featuring in your strategy right now?
Well, we have 50% impact funded by the Bill Gates Foundation, so we have
100%
we have goals to meet on that, and we do that. We in several World Bank government projects in India. It is a big part of what we do, and the structure is different. There are a lot of layers in that kind of projects that we undertake. It's not all pure tech. There's a lot of hand-holding that goes on in the ground, but it's very relevant, and that's why I was saying the government and the political structure that we are working in. For example, farming is a state subject in India, at least. Even if there is a central government policy to help farmers, you have to work at the state level, and there are 29 states to work with. So you have to have your systems reach out to those governments, make sure they agree with you, or it's centrally funded by the World Bank or some of the other developmental agencies, and then work with them as sponsors or consultants. But that definitely has to be done for that to achieve a large scale in India at least.
Okay, I've got one last question I'd like to run across the panel. Stefan, if you want to make a comment on the impact, sustainability, ESG side, that would be welcome.
Yeah, I think this has to be the starting point. If we want to bring any improvement, technology, whatever solution to a smallholder farmer, we need to start with the impact. And I want to disagree, for your benefit, with what was said, that Farmer Business Network has a monopoly or is the ones that put the farmer-centric. That's actually totally wrong. I think our company for 100 years has put the farmer in the center, and I think many others do here as well. We need to first create the value for the farmer, and then we can actually sort of build all the good solutions and so forth. So if we're not impact-driven and include sustainability, we will not have a business in smallholder farmers.
Okay. So we didn't get a chance to delve into the differences by crop, by stage of farm, size of farm, by stage of investor. We didn't get a chance to look at the investor perspective, unfortunately. We did get a chance, the role of government and NGOs, we just got to touch on. We did get a chance to get some richness out of this panel. I'm going to ask for one sentence of advice from the two corporates, just one sentence, on how to deal with AgTech, and one bit of advice for the corporates from our three startups as we wrap up. One sentence of advice for startups.
Find your value proposition and stick to it.
Amol, for the corporate?
Be willing to embrace change.
For the corporate?
Stand by farmers.
For the corporate?
Standardize a bit more of the hyper-configurability that they are working with.
For the startups?
Work through your return on investment proposition and model it out practically as soon as possible.
And so I think what we've heard today, everyone, and it's been, I think, a diverse set of views, and summarising this one is not easy. But first of all, we heard that anything that works in India will work in the US from an AgTech perspective. We heard that AI is going to help all aspects. But ultimately, it felt like the farmer was going to see a black box, which, if it works, is great, but it's difficult, I think, for farmers to fully embrace. Collaboration with corporates was generally actually not overwhelmingly embraced, but clearly a couple of our people on the panel, either by virtue of being corporates or working closely with corporates, see that there's a critical role. Government can make a huge difference to what's happening in Asia, and we didn't even touch on regulation. We heard that the first AgTech exit and IPO unicorn is going to be Asian from a massive 80% of our panel, except for the individual who actually intends on being the US version in Amol, which I think is, I'm glad you didn't answer that one in the affirmative. And overwhelmingly, we heard that it's about farmer first for the corporates and also for the startups, and a great diverse panel. Thank you so much, everyone.